Phillip Oakley, what one thing do you wish you'd have known 10 years ago?
Let's unpack this a lot, actually. But slow questions are much more valuable than quick answers. And so I say slow questions. I need to qualify that a little bit. I don't mean like dragging things out, but I mean actually being purposeful and taking the time to listen and ask better questions. And sometimes good questions lead to better questions. And I think it's part of the problem we have in marketing now is because let's go to the fortune cookie wisdom of LinkedIn, right? Everyone seems to have an answer. And really what they have is a hammer. And then they are looking for nails. And so if we see it every day. I've said it myself, the right answer is often it depends because we need to untuck and get into things and understand what the real problems that we need to solve are. Clients don't actually want to hear that. Most clients don't want to hear that. They have a problem. They know the problem. They're looking for answers. And it's easy. And I did this earlier in my career because I was, full of energy and, I'm a sponge and I like to learn a lot of different things from a lot of different places. But you come in and you're ready to tell everyone how much you know. Or you come in and you fully understand that I'm selling X and 80% of the people I'm talking to will buy from this if I'm confident and I can give them a use case that sounds anything remotely close to their pain point. And so I can get the sale. And that's kind of a shame because in the end, that doesn't help the client. It actually hurts every good trained marketer who actually gives a damn about our industry. And we face that a lot. So now I've gotten better about asking tons of good questions. And the best questions are the ones they don't have answers to, because that actually shows them that we have to go and figure those things out. Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is shutting up and asking questions.
So Will Reynolds, who runs an SEO, I don't think they call it an SEO agency anymore, but a search/performance agency in Philadelphia, a big one as well. He said his sales got better when a coach of his told him never to answer anything the client asks until he's asked at least 5 questions himself.
Nice.
And I was like, you just dodged the question. And he's like, no. So, the client might go, so we have this problem. We're not selling enough of X. How do we solve that problem? And he's like, but if you jump in and answer that straight away, you don't know what you're doing. Or even if the client says, tell me about your business. It's like, that's interesting. And most people just launch into telling them about the business. But ask a question first. Ask 5 questions before you start to answer that. So he's like, tell us about your business. And you're like, well, what do you want to know about the business? There's quite a lot going on here. Do you want to know about our technical skills? Do you want to know about the people who work there, about the history of the foundation story? And it's like, I want to know about the other clients you work with. What do you do for them? Okay. And what sort of clients? Do you want to know about people in your sector? Or do you want to know about, and just boom. And so you get down to it. It's like, right, we've got this one case study. We worked with this brand and we did A, B, and C for them. Or you might end up going down another line going, oh yeah, well actually we do a whole load of charity work and we help charity XYZ. And you're like, all right, okay. Asking questions is like a superpower, isn't it?
It is. It also gives you an understanding of your relationship with that client in the future, right? If they're pushy, if they don't want actually someone who's curious to come in and help make the business better, then you can figure that out really quickly. I've had those clients that say, why should I pay you to come in and understand my business? Well, that's called discovery. And if you're not willing to pay for discovery, then you and I are not going to get along very well in the future. So let's just call it a day, right?
Yeah, I had Devora Rogers, who was on a few episodes ago, she called it the velvet rope that they have with clients. It's going to keep people there. So there's only certain people we want to let in that velvet rope, and we're quite happy with everyone else on the other side of that. Because especially when you're an indie consultant, the cost of getting that wrong, and not necessarily the financial cost, the emotional cost, the effect on your other clients, the cost of that. Of getting it wrong and working with the wrong people is immense, isn't it?
It is. And it's really hard to tell out of the gates, like to have enough intelligence or foresight to pick them out and understand that ahead of time. But gosh, when it is wrong, it really, not only can it be expensive because you weren't working on other better work that could be paying better for a longer period of time, but also if they're not happy and then they spread bad word about you, it could actually really negatively affect your own brand.
Fantastic. Well, look, that's the first question out of the way, Philip. Stay there for 1 second. I've got to try and sell something, and then we'll come back and we'll get right into the interview.
Brilliant.
So, hey up and welcome to the strategy sessions. The thing I am trying to sell to you. Oh, sorry. My name's Andy Jarvis. I host the show. I run a strategy consultancy called Eximo Marketing. But Philip's here. I want to get back to him really quickly. So before we do, I just need to tell you about a workshop I'm doing with Seth Godin in Derry. That's in Ireland on Monday, the 2nd of June. All the details are in the show notes. If you want to come along, Seth dials in from the States. He spends about an hour and a half really solving all your business challenges. I've been in strategy for 10, 12 years. I've been in marketing for 25 years. Every time we run these sessions, I learn something new. It is eye-opening. It is mind-blowing. It's absolutely fantastic. All the details in the show notes. Anyway, let's get back to just a bit further south in America, from where Seth is. Let's get back to Phillip Oakley. Phil, whereabouts are you in the US? Tell us where you are.
Great. I actually want to be there with you to watch Seth Godin. That would be fantastic. Maybe I can make time for that. So I'm in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, home of cigarettes and donuts. If you haven't heard of Winston-Salem, the city, you've probably seen Winston cigarettes and Salem cigarettes. They came from the name of our city. Literally tobacco built the town we live in. So if you don't like tobacco, I understand, but it's made a big difference in the state. And also Krispy Kreme donuts started here in Winston-Salem as well. So, pick your poison. You want to go sugar? Or do you want to go tobacco?
Do you want obesity or lung cancer?
Exactly.
The choice is yours. There you go.
Exactly.
Excellent. And so give us an idea. So the big place in North Carolina is Charlotte, North Carolina. Or is that South Carolina? Here I am with my American geography.
No. You're yes is the answer. It's right on the border, and there's parts of it. Actually, there's a water park there that with a line directly through the middle of the water park, because half of it's in South Carolina and half of it's in North Carolina. So, So I'm in North Carolina, which is the better Carolina. And anyone from South Carolina, sorry, I'm going to say that out loud. It's a good place. It's easy to be in Miami or New York really quickly on the East Coast.
Excellent stuff. Excellent. So you are there in North Carolina. A lot of the audience here, kind of 80%-ish of the audience is UK based, and UK European based. Let's call it that. And to a lot of Europeans, we kind of know the big cities in the States, right? And we know the Miamis, the New Yorks, the LAs, all that sort of stuff. But it always seems to blow the minds of Europeans about just how big and how much business there is in places that maybe a lot of Europeans couldn't find on a map, like Winston-Salem. So you're based there, you're a strategy consultant there. And what sort of, you've got two big companies formed out of your city, but what sort of work goes on in and around the city now? Is it still all tobacco and donuts? Is there other things going on in and around there too?
So RJ Reynolds has been purchased by British American Tobacco. So, and then Krispy Kreme has unfortunately moved their headquarters to Charlotte. So we don't have as much of that energy as we used to. Banking has always been quite large in this area as well. Several banks started in the area and have now again moved to Charlotte. It is the Queen City, draws a lot of business, but a lot of things are happening here. Biotech is really growing. Like a lot of other places, technology is a big deal. And then a lot of software companies moving into the Raleigh area. Research Triangle Park is what they call it, RTP. And so there's a lot of tech moving to that area. It's really brilliant. It's just get into the social part of it. It's a red state with huge pockets of blue around all the cities, which is nice. I am talking politics. But you can be at the beach in a couple hours or be in the mountains in a couple hours, and it feels like completely different places. It's a really nice, beautiful place to raise a family.
Yeah, excellent. Now, when people say to me, how do you find guests for the podcast? I was like, well, there's a couple of different ways. But one of the ways that I do it is like, who says things that I either really, really like or really, really dislike on LinkedIn? And I have in the past invited people on who've said things that I just completely disagree with. One guy posted the phrase which will not die, the story is the strategy. And I was like, no, that's just bullshit. It's not even remotely true. Being a storyteller is not a strategy for it. And anyway, we ended up bringing him on and we talked about it. But I also bring on people who talk about stuff I like on LinkedIn, which is where you fit in. You fit into that category.
Thank you.
So, I'm not going to ask you what you post on LinkedIn, but let's talk about your approach to strategy with clients. How do you, what are the sort of problems that you see fairly regularly? Who do you work with, and what's your general approach to strategy?
So that's a great question. I want to say also that some great minds that we all have purchased books from, read blogs from, or maybe even purchased their mini MBAs have said things like, if you find someone who is trying to do strategy and create at the same time, they're not good at either. And I think that's wrong. I think maybe that we're redefining what strategy and creative means. That's one of our problems in this industry. We can't agree on what strategy means or brand, right? Or what marketing even is. We're so busy arguing with ourselves on what we do and what value we hold, and we're losing customers to people who are, selling things really quickly. Right? I think the biggest thing I like about strategy, or my biggest approach to strategy, is curiosity, and curiosity about the customer. Or the end user. Sometimes the customer and the end user are two different people, right? I find myself in a lot of B2B situations, although I've done just about everything under the sun, it seems. It's easier to get a bunch of data or even get, focus groups with B2C. But there's so much magic in B2B to talk to customers and to talk to salespeople, because the salespeople, they don't realize it. They hold the keys to the kingdom because they're the ones hearing the rejections. They're the ones hearing what people are drawn to. They're the ones hearing what competitors are doing, and not enough marketers are talking to salespeople. Smart marketers are, smart strategic marketers are, of course, but a lot of times the executives or the internal marketing teams I've found are have this competition with the sales team. And it really gets in the way of success.
Sat at the opposite ends of the table, throwing things at each other rather than trying to just help each other out
for no reason. Yeah, I can't remember where I heard this a long time ago, but it's really smart to have, like in your marketing stand-ups or your marketing meetings, bring a salesperson in and just get them to listen, and vice versa. Get a marketing person to come in and listen to those sales meetings. The very different cultures for very good reasons, but ultimately they will teach each other so much and also build empathy to have a better team. And now the CRO is in charge of so many things where a CMO used to have so much power control. The CROs often come from sales; they don't come from marketing, and that makes things worse. It tips the scales on the sales side of things, and leaving marketing to make branded pins or LinkedIn posts. Going back to the question about approaching strategy, it's really, really shut up and go try to talk to people and understand where the opportunities are. I've posted this a few times on LinkedIn. I say, go talk to your customers. And then I've had a few people push back, oh, no, you have to do proper research. I'm like, yeah, I'm not saying you shouldn't. You should do both. But have you physically gone and talked to someone? I worked with a brand last year. Really lovely, smart people. Honestly, the CEO is probably a better performance marketer than most performance marketers I meet. But they literally been around for a decade and haven't talked to customers. And when I said, no, we should talk to customers, I had to translate what I meant. I said, no, I physically want you to speak to people. I understood that you bought this Mentel research. It's great. All your competitors can buy that too. Have you talked to your heavy buyers? Have you tried to reach out to the people who don't actually want to buy from you or talk shit about your flavors or whatever, right? Go talk to them, understand why, and don't get defensive. Learn from those opportunities. And it was going to be expensive, obviously, to set up, these groups. It's a British company, and so we set up town halls. So we literally set up Zoom calls to meet the CEO and speak with me. And we had people in the UK, we had people in the US, we had people in France. It was fantastic. And after the very first group call on Zoom, where he got to kind of introduce himself and explain why he started the company and why he cares, and I got to go do a little bit of qual conversations and pull some things out of people. At the very end of that, the CEO and the other person that represents the company on the call said, we learned more about our customers in the last hour than we have in the last 3 years. And that was the best feedback I've had in a long time. And long story short, after 3 or 4 of those calls, we completely overlooked why a specific demographic was buying the product. And it actually opened up an opportunity for some real strategic targeting for a group that's being completely overlooked by everyone in that industry. So I don't want to get too far into the company. If this gentleman hears the pod, he's going to know exactly what we're talking about. But it was really nice for it to be that evident, the value of talking to customers and how it fed the strategy, not going through another Mintel report that everyone else can buy.
It speaks directly to my soul when I hear you say that, because it's the drum I bang all the time. Talk to your customers, and you hear lots of objections to that. So I'm going to tackle them one at a time, because you jumped straight into one of them and go. So the first one is like, it's biased data when you just talk to a small group of customers. I mean, if I had any hair, I would pull them out when I hear these objections. So, how do you tackle that when someone goes, "Oh, yeah, but you can't do anything with that because it's biased, it's not proper data"?
My response is you can still go test it, right? This is why strategy isn't a one and done situation either. It should be always ongoing. We can also talk about the difference between brand strategy and like a campaign strategy, right? Where we have different cycles of things going on. Ultimately, we want to try to have a long-term strategy that we're building up to. But how fast is everything changing, right? I mean, how many brand strategies had to shift because of the pandemic or tariffs, right? I mean, there's so many things that are on the outside that are going to affect what our businesses have to tackle and handle. You can't just, do one and done. It's really important to do that. So the idea is, get a couple small hypotheses and then go test those with the real data.
That's it. And people always, you hear 4 or 5 things if you talk to groups of people that come up over and over again. Go and test those 4 or 5 things with a bigger group, and then find out what order of importance they come up. And you go, all right, okay. Now we have an order based on lots of data. Amazing stuff. Another objection that you hear a lot in B2B world, or I've heard a lot in B2B world, is we don't need to talk to we don't need you to talk to the customers. Like, why not? Our sales team meet them every single day. They'll tell you everything you need to know. Will they? Or will they tell me what they want me to know? Yeah. Or will they tell me what's on their mind based on the last call that they had, or whether they're at target this month or not at target, and their view on the marketers generally? Am I going to get, so that's my approach. I'm like, am I actually going to get what I need? Am I going to get what they want to give me? Do you hear that objection sometimes?
Oh, all the time. And again, empathy for the customer, empathy for our client. I understand why they don't want us to talk to their customers as well, right? And so sometimes you can get some of that information out of the salespeople. And if they will not, let's be clear, sometimes they will not allow you to talk to their customers. You can use the sales team as the opportunity to go extract that information. Ask them to record it via Zoom or Otter or whatever it is they record, and then you get to watch those interactions. And so that's kind of a side door way in, as long as you get a salesperson who understands you there to help them, and they're willing to have a different kind of conversation.
I also think, you've done ride-alongs with customers as well, with sales teams?
I have, yeah.
I love a ride-along. So do you explain what a ride-along is to anyone who's like, a ride-along? What? Explain it, and why do you do them?
So, gosh, not to be industry specific, but if you've got someone who are literally getting in a truck and visiting a site, so a delivery driver or a salesperson, someone who has to do the rounds, I have to drop off the new brochures or a box of cookies, go in and watch the interaction. First of all, watch the nonverbal. How do they react to the salesperson showing up? I watched a sales guy get avoided for half an hour. The customer, the target, was making an excuse to not talk to the guy. And the sales guy who went through the Glenn Ross school of, ABC was either not picking up on the fact that the customer didn't want him there, or he didn't give a shit. And sorry, I don't know if I can curse on the show.
No, you're fine. You're fine. We're all adults here.
Really just, he didn't care, because his whole thing was, I'm doing my rounds. I'm just doing my job. And there's some magic to that. You need some of that as well. But it's an example of like, this person had no clue what the value is. Hey, guess what? Marketing can help that. So that was an opportunity there. Maybe there's different ways to reach this person. Instead of just bringing a box of cookies and the latest brochure, what kind of value can you send this person? They may actually open and welcome your call in the future. And then did a ride along with a delivery driver. And let's see, try not be too specific, but let's just say sitting in the car, I realized we drove past 8 competitors to get to a neighborhood where they were delivering. And then I started asking the delivery driver questions. Why? Why are they not ordering from these other places? And then I got to talk to the customers that were receiving the information. And it really came down to one thing, and it's because the delivery was free. Now, we can argue if that's about price all day long, but they were delivering to a low-income neighborhood. Free to someone who can't afford to get an Uber or a taxi to take them to go pick up this item they needed is very different than you or I, because we have busy schedules, where free may not mean as much because we can just drop by, right? But that they were not capitalizing on really calling out why free delivery made a difference, but also they weren't targeting peer neighborhoods who are facing the same socioeconomic challenges. And that was a big opportunity for us to go out and do that. And it literally was 2 hours in a car that gave us that opportunity for that advertising strategy, if you will.
Comes back to what you were saying earlier about curiosity. That's your approach to strategy, curiosity. Without being curious enough to spend a couple of hours in a van with a delivery guy, you'd have never found that out. So
that's exactly right.
So the other objection I hear about talking to customers is I don't have 2 months to be able to get this information from customers, and my eyes roll hard. I've had to stop it. I've had to work on my poker face with people and clients like, we just haven't got 2 months to be able to do this. Do what? Talk to customers. We can't organize focus groups. We can't run a survey. We just don't have time to get that information. Mm-hmm. Like, okay. You don't have 2 months to talk to a customer. Do you ever get that? And you're like,
all the time, right? Yeah. And I think the pushback is, well, we can continue to do some short-term performance stuff while we're doing the real work in the background. We can do both. Mm-hmm. And as a matter of fact, I can give you a team who's really good at performance marketing. Not my gig, right? So they can keep doing the playbook that you've been trying, which, by the way, hasn't been working, which is why you called me in the first place. I want to give my wife a huge shout. My wife, who's my business partner also at Common Giant, the agency I founded in 2012. She sent one of the smartest closing emails I've ever seen in my life. We had a customer doing this, all the questions you've said, all the things you've said, every single one of them. And then, the last one was like, I've heard all this before from other agencies. And so after we'd sent the proposal and we were waiting a few days, hadn't heard back, she sent one more email. And the email, leaving out the details, basically said, you said you've heard these things before. Can you tell me why it hasn't worked? And then waited. Now that was a long period. It took a couple of days for that to come back around. Mm-hmm. And the client's response, give that person some credit, very bright, said, because we've never allowed the agency or the consultant to do it their way. So they signed the proposal right there. And so some of it is putting it back on them. Like, I get it. You want to do it your way. There's a reason you called me. And there's a reason that, here's 5 people in the industry who are well respected who are going to say the same thing. By the way, this is where I trained. And so you can't afford them. And I'm here, right? But yeah, that's a good one. And can I give you an example that kind of lines up all these things, especially the whole where you can't talk to just a few customers. I'm going to give you an example where one customer made millions and millions of dollars of shift for retail. Now, this is actually before I went back to school for advertising and design and got into our industry, floundering a little bit in between university stops, trying to figure out what I was going to do. I actually worked retail. So you want to talk about being in the trenches and understanding how to help people, how to listen to customers, how to actually go find answers when you don't have them. I felt like being on the front lines in retail has made me a much better marketer. I also think bartending or waiting tables is a good idea too, by the way.
100%. Yeah. Either of those two, retail or hospitality, is a very important job, I think, for most marketers to do.
Isn't it? So I was a kid. I was 20 years old, and I was running a $10 million a year garden center in a $34 million a year store. And every spring, a lot of these garden centers, especially for the big box home improvement stores, they will have flex space out front. They will literally block off parking places, put up temporary chain link fences, and put pallets of plants inside and try to keep someone out there watering all day to really mine theft or shrink. And one day I'm standing out in front of the store. It's a Saturday. We should be slammed. We're not that busy. And this little old lady, little old sweet lady, she kind of walks up and I greeted her. Quite outgoing, so retail was fun for me. I like people. And greeted her and said hello and had a little small talk. And she said, well, you guys aren't as busy as I thought you were. And that's when the curiosity, the radar goes up and the flags start, going and the bells go off. And I just said, what do you mean? She said, well, there's cars parked all the way to the street. So I thought you guys were really busy today. So that creates more questions. And what I found out is when cars were parked near the street, people on the main road in front of the store assumed we were busy and they kept going to our competitor who didn't have as good a garden center as we did.
Right.
So the solution was we were losing 40 parking places in front of the store in the busiest season of the year. The solution was we blocked off an area beside the store and basically extended the footprint of the store, blocking off a side road. Pissed off a few customers who lived close because they knew the secret entrance to the store. But we gained those 40 parking places back. And the results in one season, Andy, an increase of 30% in sales, and we cut our shrink in half. So we cut our loss in half from plants that were dying, bad goods that were being stolen, and we added 30% to the sales because of nothing about price or product selection or promotion. It was human nature of thinking we were busy when we weren't. Yeah. And that came from one little old lady saying, well, you're not as busy as I thought you were.
So that's an amazing story, absolutely amazing. And one of my lecturers at my postgrad, his area of expertise was small businesses. So small businesses in the UK are different to in the US. Sure. You're probably talking anything up to sort of 15 million, 20 million in turnover, something like that. But one of the things he said about small businesses that always stuck with me is they are one of the definitions, or if you look at not definitions, one of the characteristics of a small business is they are often very close to the customer because the distance between the owners or the key people is quite short. You get into bigger organizations and that distance starts to extend. You've got a head office, out in retail, or you're here, there, and everywhere. And I talk glowingly about McDonald's. McDonald's have a lot of problems as an organization, certainly in the UK where there's lawsuits and various things going on. But one of the things they do right, their head office staff are out in McDonald's restaurants. I hate saying restaurant for McDonald's. It's a burger joint, right? They do food, but it's not a restaurant. Yeah. But their head office team go out into restaurants to work every year. They do a week, I think, maybe 2 weeks sometimes. Other big retailers, Currys, which is the UK version of Target, pretty much. Yeah. All their senior team in the run-up to Black Friday, they're out in stores selling TVs. Keeps them close to the customer. You have to work a bit harder for it. But when marketers say to me, oh, well, it's going to take us 2 months to talk to a customer. I'm like, do you get customer service calls? Well, yeah, we have a department to do that then. I was like, well, go and spend an hour in that department and you'll talk to probably half a dozen customers in an hour. Or do people email in questions? Yeah, email them back or go back to them on social media saying, could we talk to you about this? And then pick up the phone and you'll talk to 4 people before noon. Oh, no, we don't do that. And what did you say, $30 million?
Yeah, well, it was
it went
talking to a customer? 30%. It was 30% increase of a $10 million garden center. One department, by the way. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And there are, maybe not everything's going to have such a huge impact, but there are wins hiding all over the place, often in plain sight. Just by putting yourself in the shoes of the customer for an hour, you will find these things. What matters to people, not what matters to you. It's huge. I genuinely think the 2 most dangerous words that can come out of a marketer's mouth are "I think," and we shouldn't be criticizing people for thinking, but when you hear that from a marketer, you're just like, yeah, exactly. Cheers, mate. This is really good.
I love that. Love that.
Yeah, so I think the 2 most dangerous words from marketing ever.
I love what you said also about the call center. How much magic would it be in an executive, not necessarily the CEO, but a VP or any other C-level, to just go to the call center, unless it's outsourced, of course, which you shouldn't do, but go sit Say, you know what? Don't tell anyone I'm here. Pretend like I'm a new employee because I don't want them nervous that the VP is here, the C whatever
Hmm.
O is here. And I'm going to come in, train me for 15 minutes like you normally would anyone else. And I'll sit down with my ops manual and I'll take a few calls.
Yeah.
And if you're an executive making $300,000-$400,000 a year and you can't follow the exact same training that some minimum wage employee or, $10, $15, $20 an hour employee can do, if you can't do that, then first of all, operations is broken.
Hmm.
Secondly, you'll build empathy for the people who are the front line of your business, which is who's handling angry calls for customers you might be losing.
Yep.
And thirdly, you're going to build empathy for your customers because you're going to actually hear the types of questions they have. And there's a lot of magic with, and not just marketing and sales, but there's a lot of magic for leadership. Walk the floor. Get out of your office and walk the floor. It sounds like an 80s movie. Go walk the mailroom, right? But also, if you have product in Walmart, a Target, or any of those other big box stores, once a month, just go walk a few
Yeah.
stores.
I had a guy from who started his life at P&G, and he was in sales at P&G. Or what did they call it? It wasn't merchandising, but yeah, he was the guy who took Pringles into the retailers, basically, or
Oh
something
wow,
like that.
yeah.
And his job was to go into stores in different places and be like, to bring them in, but when he talk to the retailer, but when he was there, he also had to walk and be like, why are we not in the prime position? Why is somebody else in a better place on the shelf? But getting in there is such an important, to roll your sleeves up and get stuck in. And we actually had a TV show over here called, I think it was just called Undercover CEO,
Oh
where,
yeah,
and the
sure,
one I
yeah,
remember, yeah, did you say, yeah, it was probably
yeah,
a
yeah.
US show we borrowed, but
Or
the
the other
one
way
I
around,
remember
yeah.
was one of these it was like recycling bin emptying companies, and
Mm.
basically the CEO went on the bin wagon
Hmm.
with the guys. Basically, oh, here's Steve, he's the new guy, and they just implemented a whole raft of efficiency changes. And basically, after like half a day, he was saying to the guy, he was like, "We're miles behind schedule," and he was like, "Yeah, well, it's impossible. Like, we've been told we've got 7 minutes to go from place A to place B, empty the bins, and then go to place C, but that's actually a 14-minute drive, and that's if there's no traffic. So we're always doomed." And then he was like, "So, well, why haven't you got more time?" And the guy was like, "Well, the idiots at head office think we can do it in 7 minutes." And this whole episode was just this guy. And at the end of the went, "Oh yeah, so this is Steve. He's the CEO." And the guy w'ho'd been ripping head office apart was like, "I'm really sorry. I'm going to lose my job." He was like, "No, no, you might have just been promoted," because he
Brilliant.
was like,
That's great.
I needed to do this to work out that what we're giving you is setting you up for failure."
Yeah,
But it shouldn't be a TV program before that
yeah.
happens, should it?
No, no,
No.
and it happens so often. But there's an agency kind of like consultant. He consults with agencies for marketing and selling themselves.
Mm-hmm.
David Baker, I think is his name,
Okay.
and he says it's hard to read the label from inside the jar, which is one of the brilliant. It's just smart for why you would hire an outside consultant or an agency to come and help. But you can also crawl outside that metaphorical jar yourself and walk around.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the value of going and talking to people outside of the Crystal Palace, if you will. Go walk the stores and talk to those customers.
Yeah, and I know it's difficult to do, and I know if you work in e-commerce, particularly, it's even harder to do. There's no physical location
Mm,
for you to go and walk around. Not all e-commerce, sorry, but like if you're online only, there's no store to
sure.
go and walk around. It's harder to get hold of a customer, but there are ways. People are if you're an online only business, imagine your social channels and your customer service inbox and your chat functions are probably a pretty lively place, right? And I think with a little bit of thinking and a little bit of getting off your chair, you can
Yeah.
work out a way to hear from customers. And that's not to say you should be changing the whole infrastructure of the business based on what two disgruntled people tell you because their delivery was late.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting when, because what's a late delivery? Sorry, there's a great scene in a Christmas movie called Arthur Christmas, I don't know if you've seen Arthur Christmas, right?
It's been a couple of years, but yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
But the new efficiency guy comes in, and it's like classic business bullshit. And he's there going, "Oh yeah, so this child's not going to get its present, but that means we're at 99.87% efficiency delivered by Christmas, and he'll still get his present within the window of Christmas." And he's just like,
that's a great metaphor,
and it's perfect because you then go, yeah, because on the sheets when you're looking at it in your office, this isn't a problem. 98.9% efficiency. Fantastic. We know everyone gets a pay rise. Woohoo.
That's great.
What does it mean to the person at the other end? Because the child on Christmas Day in Arthur Christmas is going to be sat there crying. And spoiler alert, if anyone hasn't watched the film, he gets the present on Christmas Day. Arthur saves Christmas for this child. But what does it mean? You talk to 2 customers who've had a missed delivery. Might not be anything to do with you. It might be the delivery company's fault. But if you're tracking, you're probably in e-commerce world tracking the metrics of delivery. And you start to see that slipping. You're like, do we need to be changing contract here? How do we address this? If people tell us our website's good, our service is good, our prices are good, it's like bump, 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 and then it drops when it comes to delivery. But what do people say about the delivery? What do people say about your product? Because if the end of the movie is bad, that's the bit people remember. And the last mile is done by someone else, but they still say, oh, yeah, this product's terrible. It was late. No, the delivery company delivered it late. Your product's terrible. It turned up late. You got to fix that. And 2 disgruntled customers can tell you where to look for that. So I'm a big fan of just getting a conversation with a customer whenever you can. Whenever you can.
Well, and what's the repercussion if that package isn't delivered? That one person doesn't believe in Santa any longer. That is another metaphor for the brand. Oh, they let me down. You're not going to hear that person change brands.
Yeah.
You're also not going to hear about the 5 or 10 people they tell that they lost faith in Santa Claus, right? Mm-hmm. And that leads to, I love the DTC conversation because DTC seems to think that it has its own playbook that's completely separate from all the other stuff we talk about, STP or the 4 Ps or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And it's great. I get it that there are some niche. I'm just trying to figure out how to turn the word. There are some.
We'll explain in a minute why we're laughing about this.
There are some niche tactics and things that I get it. You go through, but even if you're online only, realizing through proper training to marketing that no one gives a shit about your category, they give a shit about their own problems. Mm-hmm. Your problems that your product is satisfying is still available somewhere at retail. So go to the store, find out what people may be buying or interested in buying or solving their problem with that you're competing with and you didn't even know it. That also might give you an opportunity for a new strategy because I promise you, everyone else in DTC, everyone's got the same playbook. You're copying the same stinking ads. Meta is telling you the same A/B bullshit results that make the most money for Meta, not for you. Sorry for the hard truth. But if you can go discover a category that you could compete in that no one else does, they'll be copying you in the future because you're going to open up some gold that is customer focused or customer oriented, not just the DTC playbook that everyone else is trying to follow.
The other thing that going in store, especially if you sell physical products in store that you mentioned, I actually remember you posted about this. I'm not even going to try and find it because it was probably about 6 months ago. You were in a store. I think it was a category that you'd worked in before, maybe a hardware store, and you'd posted about just how homogenous all the products.
Caulk.
Maybe it was like fence paint or caulk.
Caulk.
That was it.
It was caulk and adhesive.
Tell us about the picture you took, and they're not a client, are they? So you can talk about it openly.
Former client. So yeah,
former client. Well, stuff, and we can talk about.
No, smart. And so again, this is a unique place because I worked at big box home improvement retail. So I've been the stock guy who literally case cut the things and put them on the shelf, that drew contractors to go buy the contractor packs on the bottom shelf because they're not case cut, or try to explain the difference in the silicone based or non-silicone based, or when to use it, or don't trust your contractor. They're cutting corners and trying to save money. You should actually buy the more expensive things. Like been on the front line. Technically, I guess that's sales, right? And then flip side, being a marketer and listening to the same conversations. And you can tell who's actually been in the store and helped a customer versus someone who's actually, basing something on research or what a competitor is doing, but also a designer a designer's designing a new tube of caulk. And yeah, the tube looks great. Guess what happens when you put that tube of caulk in a case cut cardboard case? You can't see the bottom half. So sorry, everything is above the fold, just like a website. And if I can't stand 6 feet away and tell why your blue tube of caulk is different than a red tube of caulk, you're losing me quickly, because all you have to do is walk into a Lowe's or Home Depot here, or an Ace Hardware. I'm not sure what would be the comparable.
Your B&Q would be the local equivalent. Yeah.
So every marketer, this is a little bit of homework for you. Go into one of those home improvement stores and stand in front of the caulk. So at an average store here in the States, you've got 24 feet of caulk and adhesive. And if you stand back and look at all of that, especially if you've never worked in the category or done those home improvement projects, you'll just be surprised at how it blows you away. Like, you don't know what the hell you're looking at. So you have to sell at the point of sale. You have to drive people who are just going to pick up their phone and go to look up something, right? Also, when you go talk to customers, you'll realize the contractor is actually an influencer on the aisle. Just like they watch videos and influencers and things online, if there's a contractor or someone who looks like they know what they're doing on that aisle, then they're going to listen to them. So in this brand, it was actually GE Caulk. I'll tell you who it was. They were really smart because they recognized that if you win over the contractor, then they become the influencer, and it's just all going to roll downhill from there. Mm-hmm. Now, another thing that makes caulk interesting is all those tubes are the same size for a reason. And it's because there's a universal applicator. There's two sizes. There's the giant size that a contractor might use. That's 8% of what's sold. And then the rest of it is all the same size. It doesn't matter what type of caulk it is or what type of adhesive it is. It all goes in the same caulk gun. Mm-hmm. And so you can't even change your packaging up to differentiate yourself on the shelf. You have to remain in the same. And then the contractors want to buy the same size every time. And if you shake that up, you can try. But most likely it's not going to fit in their budget they've already been given, because they've been buying caulk this way for decades. And so that's what makes that interesting. Anyway, just go there and do a little bit of homework and see how interesting that is. It'll make soda and chips look a lot easier.
I love when you get into all these little, well, not little, because it's probably hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars category.
Yeah.
But it is quite niche. And I think that gets us with a nice little segue into another conversation we'd had previously about the great US phrase, there are riches in niches, and maybe why that is or isn't relevant for certain businesses. Now, we laughed because just before we started recording, we discussed how we might actually bring this to life, because riches in niches, it probably works when you say it. I'll let you say it. Go on, you go.
Yeah, riches in niches works well. Actually, I think a Scottish accent is about the only one who can get away with the other side.
No, I'm too close to Scotland. I can actually see Scotland from out of the window, and I am not gonna try a Scottish accent.
Yeah. Anyway,
I can only do a Scottish accent after 3 whiskeys. It just comes on, but I'm not drunk 3 whiskeys today.
That's funny.
So because it doesn't work in English, does it? There are riches in niches.
Yeah.
There are riches in niches, maybe.
You know what? I really thought I was going to try it before I got on this call, but I'm going to offend some of my friends, so I'm not going to do that. Pull out the Sean Connery accent, right? Anyway, yeah. So niches. Actually, it's really interesting because I feel like we've already talked about niches. I'm going to keep saying niches. Earlier in the call, we just didn't call it that, or we didn't, get too deep on that, right?
Yeah, I don't think there's. When you focus on the right customer, when you pick up and you start about talking to customers, you very quickly narrow your horizon. There are some brands that have really wide horizons. You've probably got one of them in your pocket or in your house, but the bulk of marketers work on products that would probably benefit from narrowing their focus rather than expanding their focus. Mm-hmm. And when you talk to your customers, you start to realize that where you're going to have the most and the biggest impact. And what I find about the States is because of the scale you have there are some people who do in marketing who do really, really niche jobs that just don't exist over here. I know a guy who does, he only does SEO for used car dealerships in a certain state.
Oh my gosh.
Is that a job? Is there enough work there? And then you look at the state and you're like, Yeah, there's probably about the same number in that people in that state as there is in my whole country. Right. Okay. So I can see, and they don't compete. No one's going to drive from one end of the state six
That's right.
six hours to the other end of the state to
That's
buy a car, so you can work with all of them. You'd be hard pressed to do that in the. I'm in Yorkshire. I'm only going to work with used car dealerships in Yorkshire. You
right.
could, but you wouldn't be making a huge amount of money.
Yeah.
But that happens a lot, doesn't it, in the US? People who are just hyper focused on one very narrow thing.
It is. And what's interesting, you triggered something. I've seen a few companies that started as marketing companies, and they did exactly what you're talking about. They focused on specific niches. And it's an example where they actually do build intellectual property. So they can sell the exact same thing. It's not a hammer and a nail. It's actually it's a very distinct, tool that
Mm-hmm.
works in a, that way over and over and over again, right? But they go from not only getting tons of digital marketing, performance marketing, SO, all that stuff that can be bundled up quickly, but also customers, again, proving they don't shop categories. They start saying, well, can you help me with this? Can you help me with a CRM? Can you help me with this? And then quickly, your marketing database goes into a CRM, goes into a reminder system about appointments, which goes into an operating system to run the whole darn business because it's all tied together. And I've seen a few of those too. Like I was talking to a mechanic and he said they bought a piece of software that basically did everything. And I said, well, nothing can do everything well. Show it to me. And we talked about it. And it actually was pretty good, but it all depended on the agency being good at performance marketing to make the rubber meet the road for the customer. So that's just smart business because then, again, it's not selling marketing services. They really got market focused and they were able to sell more business needs to the customers who were hungry for it because it did need to work together.
And do you
Go
think
ahead.
maybe this may well come close to me asking for free consultancy, but we'll see. Because I'm aware of my bias in my answer to the next question I'm going to ask. It is based on the fact that I am not industry specific. Most of the work I do tends to be on new launches. So often,
Oh, nice.
strategy consultancy, but with brands that have something new to do. They have a team that does business as usual, and then someone comes and says, "Oh, we want to take product A and launch it in market B." And they're busy, so they need kind of some help with that, or so there's something new, and that tends to be when I come along. But I tend to work across several different sectors. I've done automotive, I've done alcohol, I've done
Wow, nice.
a couple of B2B things. I'm working with a data company at the minute, so it's quite varied, but all around newness generally. So the question, the reason I give you that background and that context is because that gives me a bias to this next question. But do you think it's a good thing when clients choose someone who's just a specialist in their sector? Are the pros and cons to it? Should they be looking for people with wider experience?
It's a great question, Andy, and I've thought about it a few times. I actually think maybe the industry dictates that. So if you're in medtech or healthcare services, if you're actually operating in a place where the information that goes out, your social media, you can't just make content because the FDA could actually shut your company down for giving the wrong advice. There are places where you should have some deep industry expertise to provide the most value for a certain company size. Um, you know, Something like that. I'm just going to use medical as an example. If you're focused on medtech or healthcare, you can actually hire medical writers to help you make sure that you're putting the right message across. It's not just about creative. It's not just about,
I didn't realize
getting
you had any
attention.
laws about medical advertising in the US. It seems like the Wild West whenever I'm over in the US. It's like, here's a tablet that's banned in every other country in the world. You can buy it online now and we'll ship it to your desk. Only take one a
Yeah,
month, but we'll sell you 400 in a box for $20. And you're like,
exactly.
how
Well,
is this legal? But
that's the dirty underbelly of the pharmaceutical industry too, right? That's
yeah,
a different
I didn't realize you had
conversation.
any rules about medtech. I thought it was just like, yes, it's fine was the answer to everything. But wow, who knew there were rules and laws? Who knew?
You know what? That is also, Andy, a great. Again, there's so much of this. There's like a nice little hub in the middle, and we're going to spoke out to other parts of the wheel, right? DTC, there's people making claims they shouldn't be getting shut down. You just don't hear about them getting shut down. Or they're hiring some influencer because they've got followers, and then the influencer has no proper training, and they're talking bullshit because it's what their people want to hear. And then the company gets a letter. You made false claims. No, we didn't. Yeah, you did. Here's the link to the TikTok. You're still responsible because someone you paid on your behalf gave advice that is not proper medical advice. We don't hear about those things. They do happen. I'll give you a fun story. I had a medtech client. We had a product that was actually in review with the FDA, right? Going through clinical testing. So we could make some claims. The things we could talk about with the device were the ones that are already approved from predicate devices. So other devices that had made this claim, been approved by the FDA, we could make those same claims. Our device actually solved a different problem, but we couldn't say it out loud outside of clinical trials because the FDA had not approved us. So we thought we were going to make approval by CES. We did not make approval. We had already invested the money. We went to CES. We used it as an opportunity to have the conversations, to let investors show that we were out in the market, do a little bit of qual, talk to people, right? But also see what other devices were in the medtech world that might be competing with our attention. And just like you, anytime you start to learn about a new business or a client, isn't it amazing how much interesting data we collect as marketers too? Like everything, like you said, from alcohol to tobacco cessation or medical information. We do acquire a lot of information. But I'm standing there and I'm in the booth. And a guy comes up, he did the normal thing with, when you don't want your tag scanned, they'll flip their name card around where you can't scan the tag. So I didn't think a thing about it. We're talking. He's asking good questions. I had good answers. I actually knew my shit because that's our job, right? I actually knew what I couldn't say. And so we got to the point where he's asking technical questions about things that were in testing. And I said, well, we're going through some FDA testing for that. So, there's some things I'd love to tell you about, but why is his name tag flipped around? I'm sorry, who are you with again? Flipped it around. He was with the FDA. So he had literally walked up to the booth, knew we were going to be there purposefully. One of his stops was our booth to come up and just see us and meet us and talk to us. And he got me right up to the point where I was ready to, back of the hand say, it will actually do this. And I didn't, thank goodness, because jokingly, if he was frankly doing his job, he could have actually got us in big trouble. But that was the moment where I said, here's my client. You're going to talk to them now. So
that's where industry expertise comes in really, really handy then.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, regulated industries. I would agree with that.
Otherwise, I think it's the flip side. I think that for almost any retail can learn from other retail, right? Mm-hmm. I think DTC can learn a ton of people who've put products on shelves and sold through at retail. I think there's a lot of, even outside of industries, right? I think there's a lot that B2B can learn from B2C, especially when it comes to standing out in the market. So I do think maybe it comes down to the industry, and regulated industries should probably be treated a little bit different.
Yeah. I also think as well, it depends, like if you're not the biggest in the market, and the most people I work with aren't the biggest in the market,
Same.
There's a lot to be said for some clients for just looking a bit like what everybody else does, because you're trying to sort of take away the mental pressure of buying your product. And there's a lot of people make a lot of money by looking a bit like the number one in the market,
exactly.
Or at least trying to convince people that they're not too dissimilar, just a bit cheaper. Mm-hmm. And if you want to look like everybody else in the market, why not hire someone who does that all the time? I think if you want to look different, and different products and different services need this for different reasons. But if you're trying to stand out in the market or launch something new and make a noise, then you don't necessarily need people who've got the playbook how everybody else does it, unless you're asking them to bring it in, turn it around, and give you it a different way. So, but I know I'm biased because I don't have that. If I was sat here as a specific alcohol product launch guy, I'd be like, you must always hire the alcohol product launch guy because it's me.
That's what I'm selling, right? Exactly. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. Here's my hammer and there's my nail.
Exactly. And I don't knock anyone who's trying to sell those services, especially if they sell good services, right?
It depends, is it? Which brings us back to where
it depends.
It depends is the answer. We've got the marketing, it depends klaxon going off in the background.
Exactly.
Well, listen, we have flown through this interview, Philip, so thank you very much for your time. Before I let you run off back to the what looks like great sunshine of North Carolina,
It is. It's nice.
tell me, excellent, that's what I like to hear. Tell me a book, a recommendation, a podcast, a resource, or something that you think other people should look at or read or listen to.
Yeah, sure. So you've had some really good recommendations. Obviously, we could name all the ones in our industry. My first note is to go read fiction. Any fiction you like. I don't care. You mentioned storytelling earlier in the call. How are we talking about being storytellers? And storytelling could be building a brand narrative or a manifesto, or it could be an ad campaign, or even understanding how to communicate why our distinctive brand assets exist in a space. All of that could be storytelling. Where are you learning how to tell stories? Because it's not from reading the latest Marketing Week book. Actually, Ritson is pretty good storytelling. He can weave a few stories.
Yeah, he's probably the only one in Marketing Week. I never said that.
Well, give Rory some tips too. Like, that guy loves to tell a story, right? But go read some fiction, and read old fiction. Read fiction, sure, you saw Lord of the Rings. Have you read the books? Go learn about proper character development and build some empathy for some people. That's why you care when they die in a book, is because they've actually caused you to give a shit about them, right? And that's a big problem we have in this industry, is we forget that we have to convince customers they should actually care, or be worth remembering.
I go to a lot of conferences every year, and my favorite is the Belfast Media Festival, because it's not a marketing conference. So TV, the British TV, movies, and radio industry come together in Belfast. It's not the biggest one of those, as Edinburgh's is much bigger, but it's on my doorstep, right? And you get like screenwriters coming, talking about how they develop stories, how they adapt books to films. And you get radio coming along, talking about how they create radio comedy, which is very different to TV because there's no visual aspect to it. So a radio comedy has to work in a very different way to a TV comedy. And I go and spend 2 days sitting in these sessions with people talking about how they develop, whether it's comedy, whether it's fiction, whether it's documentaries, whether it's TV. And I was just like, wow, it's just incredible. And I love that festival when it comes around. I learn so much. It's great.
That's cool.
Yeah, I love the idea of reading more fiction.
Well, I'm gonna ask you for a ticket. I'll fly my butt over if you'll get me in, right?
Definitely. I'll even Airbnb you the room for a very reasonable rate.
Nice. So I'll give you one title that's not fiction, and a lot of people may have read this, but it's Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And the reason I think this is an important book, it's an easy read. Actually, I take that back. It's not an easy read. It's a quick read.
No, I was going to say, I haven't read it, but I know of it. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's talk about building empathy by speaking to someone. And he basically survived a concentration camp by figuring out how to have a relationship with the people who were there to treat him like garbage and eventually kill him. And it really helps you understand how the importance of engaging in a conversation, even when it's not comfortable. And, if this gentleman could do that in a concentration camp, I promise you our listeners can go and walk the caulk aisle at a big box home improvement center and talk to customers.
Amazing. Phillip Oakley, what a way to finish the strategy sessions. Thank you so much for your time. And if anybody wants to get in touch, your details are in the show notes, but LinkedIn, the best place to find you?
I love LinkedIn. Big fan. Yeah. Well, big fan when used properly, but yes, find me on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. Phillip, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Andy.